Hello, I'm Hannah, and this is Hannah's Books. Well, this has been a week. Last time in my weekly rambles, I mentioned that I was feeling a bit concerned about how close our society seemed to be to falling apart. That has not been my preoccupation this week. Instead, I've been more than a bit concerned about how close my house was to falling apart. I'm not talking about the tensions that can arise when you put 4 adult introverts in a small house for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'm talking about basic structures. What we thought was a minor toilet leak upstairs quickly turned into a soaked ceiling in our dining room downstairs. Although we would have loved to avoid inviting strangers into our house during the pandemic, we knew we couldn't put off calling the plumber to deal with our emergency. I won't go into all the details, but it turned out that it was a major problem, one which required us to move out of our house for a few days, and which meant the plumber and his team would need to dismantle the ceiling as well as the adjoining sidewall. You can imagine how hard it is to spend a few days out of the house during the great isolation when several people are teleworking and there's a huge rainstorm going on as well. Our family called on 2 different close friends who happen to have currently unoccupied basements, including entrances that we could access without human contact. David and I camped out in a small studio apartment, pretty basic but complete, with not only a nice little kitchen area, but also a few craft beers for us in the fridge, one of which I drank while having a Zoom happy hour with my friend and another friend while she sat in her upstairs home and I sat in her basement apartment. David spent the day on work calls, and I tried really hard to make sure I did not accidentally appear on his screen in my pajamas, or worse. My son and his girlfriend have, luckily, finished up all the real work of their college semesters just in time, although both of them have some work to do preparing for their summer plans and for their proposals for their senior theses, due shortly. The 2 of them hung out in cushier digs than we did, complete with a second room with a movie projector and screen. Perfect for them, since they're film buffs. But they didn't get a kitchen, so it was a trade-off I was happy to make. Luckily, we've now returned to our house, which is still missing a big section of ceiling, which will have to be patched at some point. And our bank account is also missing a big section. Still, we're thrilled to be back with what now feels really quite spacious and private compared with our recent life. Needless to say, I wasn't all that productive this week in any way, including my reading and my booktubing. But I did do some, including some time spent with a couple of novels. One is Marilynne Robinson's beautiful Gilead, which I'm reading for maybe Midrash. I cannot believe I have not read it before. The other book I'll mention is Gloria Naylor's Mama Day, a book I loved 30 years ago, but barely remember, and which I'm buddy reading with Shawn the Book Maniac. I have a few other books getting a bit of attention as well, but not as much as I had initially planned. I promise to talk about all of them quite soon. I had planned to make a Friday Reads video, but our banishment got in the way. In my efforts to not eat up all my friend's Wi-Fi, as people worked from home in her house upstairs and David did down in the apartment, I watched very little Booktube. But I did watch a few videos, trying to catch up on some of my very favorite channels, ones I have not seen in a few weeks for whatever reason. And I also replied to some comments on my own channel. I love reading comments on my videos and participating in conversations there, but I'm afraid that's yet another thing on which I've fallen behind lately. Unfortunately, I did something really stupid and accidentally deleted a whole series of comments after responding to them. If you happen to notice that one of yours is gone, I'm so sorry. I hope none of you assumed it was deliberate. It was only my lack of tech skills. First, I want to mention two booktubers who've recently made videos of a sort of similar type to this one. The first is Jason at Byways in Bookland, who, as he often does, joins Brian at Bookish and Steve Donahue, introducing us to new booktubers and also discussing some of his favorite booktube discussions of the past week or two. I learned about a couple of channels completely new to me, and he points to some really wonderful discussions as well. Go watch his video and follow some of his links to anything you haven't already seen. The second is Jay Shea, whose regular feature, The Comments section, was especially moving this week. He talks in detail about a book discussion by Rick McDonnell of Booktube fame, a video that I'm afraid was still sitting in my Watch Later folder when I saw Jay's reply. His response video is quietly powerful and self-aware as he talks about the themes of brain injury and suicide. It is sad, but nevertheless quite an affirming video too. I hope you'll watch it, and some of Jay's other videos, many of which are really charming. Now, let me steer you to Katie at Books and Things. I say this as if there was any possibility you watched my channel and not hers. Katie was, I think, the very first booktuber I found several years ago, and she's still one of my favorites, with her excitement about Victorian classics as well as her enjoyment of current literature. I love her series of videos where she discusses books with a particular topic. This week she posted about books written from the perspective of side characters rather than main characters, that is, over-the-shoulder narrators, as she calls them. She considers authors from Emily Bronte to Anthony Powell, from Elizabeth Gaskell to Elizabeth Strout. I've always been fascinated by the impact of an author's choice of narrative styles, and Katie has some really interesting ideas here. Back when I taught literature classes, I used to ask my students to rewrite a short story or a passage using a different perspective, a different narrator. I wish I had thought to suggest using a very minor character rather than just a different major character or an omniscient narrator or something. Definitely check out Katie's video and see if you can think of some additional books with this kind of narrator and why the author chose to highlight that voice or what its effect on the reader is. Well, I've also enjoyed watching Sara at Hardcover Hearts mourn the fact that the pandemic has disrupted her plans to travel to the UK to study 18th century women novelists at an Oxford University summer program. Although Sara is, of course, heartbroken that she can't go, she's definitely made lemonade from her lemons, first by creating a reading group to join her as she reads through novels by 18th century women novelists, and second by ordering lots of books from the UK, making London come to her, as she says, since she can't go to London. I'm linking to her latest haul, or catch, as she calls it, of books that have arrived recently. I think Sara is poised to become the modern Helene Hanff, partly because of her orders, but mostly because of the great story that frames her adventures in traveling by book. The next video I want to recommend is a great discussion over at Claudia's channel, Spinsters Library, about how TBRs function. Some people hate making monthly lists of books to be read, or hate the fact that other people make them. But she shares a lot of wonderful reasons to make a TBR and to watch other people's TBRs on Booktube. I love the creativity that goes into putting together a thoughtful list of books that complement each other by topic, and which also balance each other in terms of length or style. And Claudia shows that TBRs are a way to participate in the amazing community that's Booktube, and also bring a sense of anticipation and joy to our own individual reading plans. Claudia also reminds us that making TBRs is not just a contemporary Booktube thing, or even a modern thing at all. Jane Austen's Emma makes a great TBR along with one of her friends, although she does not use the acronym. And as soon as Claudia mentioned Emma, I immediately remembered the brilliant video that Tilly at Tilly Shelf put out almost 2 years ago. Give yourself a treat and watch her characters' plans, or maybe watch them again before you make your own next TBR. Tilly's video is absolutely my favorite Booktube TBR ever, and definitely up there as my favorite video in general. Okay, another older video I want to recommend, only 2 weeks old, not 2 years, is Greg's discussion over It's Supposedly Fun of this year's Pulitzer Prize winner, Colson Whitehead's The Nickel Boys. The part I really want to mention is Greg's ending. He points out how few authors are double winners, as Whitehead now is, and he asks when we'll have a woman win the Literature Pulitzer twice, and who that person will be. His own suggestions are really interesting, and a lot of people chimed in the comments as well. Spoiler alert, a lot of us are pulling for Jessamine Ward, who has not yet won her first. Who do you think? Any ideas? Well, I've been watching a few other things on YouTube and online, other than just great Booktube videos. Last week, I mentioned that here in the Washington, D.C. area, we're lucky to have access to 2 phenomenal Shakespeare-specific theaters downtown, the Shakespeare Theater Company and the Folger Libraries Theater. Both are, of course, closed right now, as so many theaters are all over the world. I've loved the performances of previously filmed stage plays, which I've seen all over YouTube, and I've loved the episodic show about quarantine that one of my local theaters has been creating, and which I linked to last week. One of the other kinds of theater outreach productions I've been watching are dramaturgical discussions. DC Shakespeare Theater Company, or STC, has been producing weekly Shakespeare Hour talks, where a group of actors and scholars come together over Zoom to talk about related themes in 2 of the Bard's plays each week. If you want to join for the live presentations, where you can ask questions, they're broadcast via Zoom on Wednesdays, 7:30 my time here on the East Coast in the States. The recordings are later made available through STC's YouTube channel. I'll link below. This past week, actor Sam Waterston and scholar Stephen Greenblatt were both guests, along with some other very talented people. Next week's talk about As You Like It and Twelfth Night will feature the actor Michael Urie, who I loved seeing in the title role in Hamlet a couple of years ago. The following week will feature the scholar James Shapiro. I definitely recommend these discussions if you're interested in Shakespeare. In all the ones we've watched so far, my family has been struck by both the insights of the presenters and the really moving recitations by the actors of particular passages. As I said last week, if you're lucky enough to be in a comfortable position financially during the pandemic, consider throwing a donation to an arts organization you care about, one you love to attend physically in your real life, and perhaps one you're enjoying now online, perhaps one you might never have discovered were it not for the new outreach online during the pandemic. Another great literary event you can watch online is the Hay Festival, currently in progress as a digital celebration, which continues until the end of the month. I can't wait to see some of the upcoming interviews, including authors like James Shapiro, who I mentioned earlier, talking about Shakespeare in a Divided America, Hilary Mantel, Allie Smith, and Jonathan Bate talking about William Wordsworth, which I hope will still be available on video when I finish filming this. Yesterday, I listened to an interview with Maggie O'Farrell talking about her new book, Hamnet. I was especially moved by her discussion of how much the plague of Shakespeare's day influenced our own time, from the roots of community squares to the use of flowers as a sign of mourning, even to the meaning of quarantine to represent a period of 40 days of isolation. Really a wonderful interview. thanks to Shawn the Book Maniac for reminding me to go check out the schedule for the festival. To wrap up, I want to mention one short video that has nothing, explicitly at least, to say about anything bookish. It's a beautiful conversation between an adult and a young person who talk about time they've spent in nature, about their curiosity as they look at things, about their appreciation of nature. And it's also about listening to each other, respecting people where they are, and making a commitment to communicating with peace and kindness and quiet love in some of the same ways that Mr. Rogers used to communicate across generational barriers. So that's it. Here's to a good reading week, full of the joy of curiosity about the world, full of companionship, however we get it these days, and full of sturdy plumbing. Thanks for joining me today here on Hannah's Books. See you soon.